Hey, what's going on, folks? Thanks for joining. So a while back, I asked viewers what they are most interested in outside of the standard racing videos that I published, and the one that came to the top was car setup, car maintenance, and car modifications. That one came to the top of the list. So while I'm much more comfortable wheeling a car at 10/10 than I am talking to a camera, I'm going to try to step out of my comfort zone and make a couple of videos that are along those lines. The first of which is I usually highlight what changes I make to the car between seasons. I don't have a lot of changes here for 2026, but I do want to talk about a couple of those changes today. First off, I'm going to be going from a 17x10 wheel to a 17x9. Last season, my whole objective with running 17x10 was to maximize time trials, and in Tuner 4, 17x10s are legal for that class, but in SCCA Autocross that bumped me up to XA, and this is obviously not an XA prepped car. So that hurt me quite a bit on packs. So for 2026, I'm going to step back down from 17x10 to 17x9s. That'll let me compete in DST. That is a strong local class. There's fast drivers, so it's going to be good to get back into the DST class locally. There's also a Pro Solo coming to the DC region, and the car is just much better performer on packs in DST. So 17x9, still going to run 255 Bridgestones. I actually stockpiled a set of the RE71 RS, so I'm not going to be on the RZs this season. I'll let other people experiment with those, and I'm going to stick to the RSs. So that's one minor change, but the big change for 2026 is suspension. The choice here is going to cause a lot of controversy. I'll start by highlighting, though, the two primary functions of a suspension. One is to support the weight of the car. Two is to keep the tires in contact with the road surface. Those are the two most important jobs of suspension. I want you to note that suspension stroke is your friend in extreme situations, and that, contrary to popular belief, softer provides more mechanical grip. I'm not a huge fan of the channel, but Engineering Explained does a good video that I'll leave in the video description here that talks about the science behind why a softer suspension actually will generally give you more grip, especially on bumpy circuits. In extreme cases, if you have insufficient suspension stroke, of course you might bottom out on jounce, and in which case you will shock the car and lose traction. But in the opposite direction, on rebound, there are situations where if you don't have sufficient droop travel, you may unload the inside rear tire, you may get wheel spin. These sort of things can happen on aggressive curbs, hitting bumps on a circuit, or in extreme circumstances during highly contoured roads like the Weatherly Hill Climb. Even with the Öhlins, which have a respectable amount of travel, I was getting a lot of inside rear wheel spin on the factory LSD just because I didn't have enough droop on that inside tire to keep it in contact with the road surface to put power down at corner exit. So suspension travel is definitely your friend. So for folks who have been following the channel over the years and the development of this blue car, I started off just with Bilstein B6 off-the-shelf shocks from Rock Auto. Very inexpensive, very reliable, good performing, and I first paired those with stock springs. I competed in SCCA Sport class time trials for a little bit before I eventually moved up to tuner, and the car had a lot of grip. It handled well, even on stock springs. I did go to Racing Beat springs, which did make the car subjectively feel like it handled a little bit better. I set some track records on that setup. But then after that, I went to a custom long travel coilover setup based on those Bilstein B6 shocks, but I went up to 8K, 5K spring rates. The car transitioned a little bit more sharply, say in slaloms at the autocross, and again, subjectively, it felt like it might have handled a little bit better. But then eventually I went to Öhlins, because if you all remember, I had the Öhlins on my white car. Fantastic setup. The off-the-shelf spring rates are 8K, 5K for that as well. So I had the Öhlins that were damaged in my other crash rebuilt, and I put them on the blue car, and that's how I ran the car for 2024, was with 8K, 5K. I've got a Progress 32mm front sway bar. Even with that set to full stiff and the factory rear bar, the car was quite loose. It was maybe based on my driving style. I tend to use a lot of corner entry speed and use a lot of trail braking to keep weight on the front end, to keep weight transferred to help turn in. But with that setup, the car was quite loose. So in 2025, I tried to remedy that by going to 10K front springs. It seems like a pretty wild split, 10K in the front, 5K in the rear, but that ended up working out quite well for the balance. It actually allowed me to soften the front bar to the middle setting. And with the front bar at middle, the rear bar connected, and the 10K, 5K setup in 2025, the car was beautifully balanced, handled really, really well, and just about set FTDs at a couple of events, and set a track record at Jefferson circuit. So it was a fast setup. So why am I doing something different here in 2026? I feel like the philosophy of this car, being my only car really, has always been to make it a uncompromised, good dual purpose car where it's comfortable on the street but also fast and competent on the track. So really I kind of felt like the Olin setup, while fast, was much more towards the race end of the spectrum, and that's kind of an easy trap to fall into. The progression seems to always be lower, stiffer, louder, faster, less comfortable, and I really want to make sure I stay true to what the philosophy behind this car is. So for 2026, I wanted to go back to a more sport touring setup. I have decided to go with the Bilstein PSS kit. That is an entry-level fixed valving setup. The front springs are 6.6K, which is 370 pounds per inch in cheeseburger units, and the rears are 4.2K, which works out to 235 pounds per inch. That results in natural frequencies of about 1.8 hertz front and rear, with a little more stiffness in the rear, which is not so dissimilar to how Mazda tuned it from the factory, with just a little bit higher frequency in the rear than the front. And with the big front progress sway bar, just at the medium setting, that results in a front roll couple of about 68%.
Where are they? I think they're talking about us. No way.
So one important characteristic to note though with this Bilstein PSS kit is the amount of stroke or suspension travel. It's the same huge travel that you get out of the factory RX-8 suspension. So full droop, full compression. It's pretty amazing to get a coilover kit that gives you something like that. Most of the aftermarket suspension kits you see out there have reduced travel, and you can see that here in the pictures I have of the Olin's kit. I'm a big fan of suspension travel, and I'm a big fan of letting a good suspension work. I think Mazda saw shortcomings with respect to the FD RX-7 and the amount of suspension stroke that was available on that platform. And for the RX-8, I really think one of their big design philosophies and goals was to enhance suspension stroke, again, to keep your tires in contact with the roadway under extreme conditions. So I've had the kit on there for a couple of weeks, and I can provide some initial impressions. On the street, it seems to ride just as softly as the Olin's did when it was on the factory rates. When I had stiffened the front springs on the Olin kit, I think that rode a little bit firmer. But the Bilstein PSS kit rides very nicely on the street. In fact, you would almost be hard-pressed to tell it's on coilovers, except for the slightly better controlled body movement and the slight increase in responsiveness of the platform. So I had intended for this to be only an introduction video because I plan to park the car for the winter and only bring it back out in the spring for the first race. However, just recently there was a circuit sprint event hosted by Getfast. They call that a Trackcross event, and it's where you go on a real fixed circuit and you run a sprint for a portion of that. And I will leave a link to the video of that event here in the video description. So that was a great opportunity to try out this new suspension on the circuit sooner than I had expected to. So I appreciate my brother Kurt on encouraging me to come out and participate in that race. Now, that circuit sprint event was quite rainy and it was a little bit cold. And the Jefferson circuit that we raced on actually has a few areas where it's quite bumpy. So in many regards, that was a perfect scenario, low traction, bumpy circuits, to try out a softer, more compliant setup. I've got general all-season tires. They work respectably in cold, damp conditions. I don't think that they were quite as fast as maybe some of the Continentals or Michelins that showed up that day. Even so, I was able to take first place in the largest class there, which is Street Rear-Wheel Drive 1. I took first in all three heats, which is 3 different circuit sprint configurations, and I was even able to set fastest time of the day in the third heat in Jefferson reverse. So that speaks pretty well for the potential pace of this suspension setup, at least on my car and with my driving style. The car balance felt really great out of the box. I didn't know if it would understeer, oversteer. I didn't know if that would happen at corner entry, corner exit, but the car churned in nicely. It felt stable under transients, but I could get it to rotate at corner entry. Under most conditions, it was pretty planted at corner exit, although that was challenging for everybody in the rain. So the balance out of the box with my alignment and with my sway bar settings felt really good as a baseline. So I'm looking forward to how things will feel in the dry. One thing to note on the Bilstein PSS kit also is that the front shock valving feels to be quite aggressive, and the rear damper valving feels to be somewhat more conservative. So I could tell by just trying to push in the damper rods when I took them out of the box that the fronts were almost impossible to push in by hand. The rears took considerably less effort. And my theory on why Bilstein might have done this is that with the more aggressive front shock valving, that will give you more stable response during extreme transients like slaloming, and it'll give you a little bit more stability at churn-in, which are things that I definitely need with my driving style. But mid-corner, when it really just comes down to the front roll couple and the spring and sway bar and alignment settings, then the car, the shocks are playing less role once the car is taken a set, and the car can still have a very neutral handling balance mid-corner. So to summarize, I think what they did is enhance stability under corner entry and in transients, but still allowed the suspension to work in a very neutral, balanced mid-corner and through corner exit. So I'm looking forward to, of course, giving this setup a try here in 2026 in the dry, on a dry sticky track with sticky race rubber. We'll have to see what the body roll looks like in those situations. I do, of course, run the big front sway bar, which does a lot to help control the amount of body roll that you get. But eventually, bump stop tuning, I feel like, may play an important role. Mazda gave it a fantastic suspension geometry front and rear. It gains plenty of camber in corners. So rather than lock down the suspension and not let it do its job of keeping the tires in contact with the road, I'm more in favor of letting the car move and letting the suspension do its job. So again, time will tell if this suspension stands up to sticky rubber in high grip conditions, but I'm looking forward to demonstrating that you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have good ride quality on the street with great pace on track, all while on a budget. So stay tuned for 2026, and I'll see you soon.